Let's start today's discussion from this position. Black to play. Please find a good plan for black in this position. While I'm setting the context of this episode, please imagine that you're playing with the black pieces, try to read the board, and maybe find that surprisingly strong plan that every Slav player should know. I'm now working on my first ever opening course, as some of you know, that is based on the Slav structure. The course is a black repertoire against everything but e4. And we'll be using those Slav patterns and chunks to build our repertoire. This middle game plan recurred while I was working on the course, and I felt I should share it with you because you might immediately use it in your games to win surprisingly beautiful victories. Slav has this little connotation of being a little bit boring, maybe a little bit dull, but I will challenge those assumptions with this course and also with this video. It can be very dynamic, very powerful, and we can even attack the opponent's king in those structures. Every opening also contains typical tactical motifs. For example, you're a great player if you already noticed that queen takes g6 is a big threat right now because the f7 pawn is pinned, right? This was one of the basic points of queen c2. Suddenly, they are indeed attacking the pawn on g6 because there will be an illegal move, f takes g6. So, black combines the threat perception with seeing their good plan on the king side, and they come up with the move g5. This is not only a single move that stops their threat. Indeed, this g5 motif has much deeper connotations, folks. g5 is not only the move that parries the threat. It has a much deeper point, and that's the topic of today's episode. Maybe already here, you can tell me one of the great points of the move g6, g5. Folks, as you will soon see, one of the main points is at a later stage, play g6, king g7, and rook h8, and start occupying the h file. That's the pattern I'm talking about today. These double pawns look like they cannot move forward. It's very cumbersome. What kind of an attack are you talking about on the king side even, right? That's a surprising part. But indeed, black has some attacking chances on the king side because of the semi-open h file. But the rook needs to go there at some point. And this move ultimately prepares g6, king g7, and rook h8. Again, this pattern happens all the time in those Slav middle games. That's why it's a very useful pattern for you. If you know this, you can apply it in your games confidently. But before we see all this, black needs to prepare the king side push. By the way, if you go knight g4 directly with this threat, white can even play h3, and after queen h2, king f1, there is no threat whatsoever. The king is escaping via e2. Well, and this is a big threat. Once knight moves, queen will take on g6. So knight g4 directly doesn't work for black in this position. But black first plays g5, multifunctional move. After g5, I will show you how the actual game went. They play h3 to be able to, let's say, stop knight g4 ideas. Makes sense. But black first typically stabilizes the bishop on b4. That's the outpost on b4. Very typical in the Slav structures. Plays on those dark squares. Queen d3. Well, this is the worst placed piece. The knight on b6. And he moves it to d7. Already here, guys, can you see it? The knight eyes the c5 square to disturb the white pieces, maybe to trade off the good bishop on b3. But the knight also has some intentions on e5 later on. Black knight also slowly moves to the king side action, where black has lots of dynamical chances. By the way, even those ideas should be stopped by white at all times, right? Can you see? The queen and bishop battery can also target the king side. Already here, black has potential on the king side, and that's a great question. Queen d4. Do you exchange the queens or do you keep them on the board? Queen trade always connects to king safety in chess. Whose king is safer? Well, we talked about our king side initiative in this position. So, our king is safer, no queen trade. He plays the move queen e7. Fernando Peralta with the black pieces in 2004. He was around 2,500 player at that time. Very strong player. Queen e7. Again, dark squares. He defends here. He prepares knight e5, but most importantly, he's keeping the queens on the board. Okay? Bishop c2 to avoid knight c5 ideas. Rook e8. The rook also joins the battle, stops moves like f3 because there's pressure on the pawn on e3. And now comes my question. Queen d3. They're eyeing those ideas. Well, what's the move for us? Tell me, please. How do you intensify your kingside action in the long run? Yes, the move is g6, not only to blunt the battery, but also very importantly, very typically, prepare king g7 and rook h8 at a later stage. This is the pattern that I'm talking about in this episode, right? It looks like a very small plan, very slow plan, but in fact, this will occur over and over again in your games. King g7, very typical. Black gets ready for a potential rook h8 and maybe g4 to open up lines on the king side, right? Our king side initiative has been growing, not to mention bishop d6 ideas. White always needs to check those ideas. Knight c3 is a very bad piece, very typical in the Slav. Our c6 pawn is burying that knight on c3, right? Beautiful pawn to stop all activity by the white knight in this position. g3, well, they have to play g3 to be able to, let's say, guard against those ideas. And maybe after g4, they want to go h4, but now comes the key moment. First of all, queen e7, preparing knight e5, very nice move. Knight joins the battle on the king side as well. White needs to shuffle back and forth with moves like bishop b3, and now comes rook h8, guys, right? Rook h8, our plan is accomplished. Our initial plan of g5, g6, king g7, rook h8 is on the board, and now white has issues on the pawn on h3. King g2 is the only move to guard the pawn. Comes knight e5, step by step. Every single piece is joined the king side action, comes with tempo. And again, guys, it's your turn. There's only one winning move for black in this position. Can you please find it? It's black to play and win. It's even nicer if you saw 2 plies deeper, maybe 3 plies deeper before you make your move, okay? Don't stop on the first move. Expect the best response by white and then come up with your follow-up against that response. Go a little bit like maybe 5 ply calculation from here. You can set this on a physical board. That's a rewarding exercise. Of course, our idea is to attack the king on g2. Is to use our pieces that are beautifully placed on the king side to gain ground, right? To really open the floodgates against the white king. And you're a great player if you found the only winning move, g4, explosive pawn break. First point of g4 is very simple. If you take on g4, then I'm opening up the h-file and my pieces are coming in against your king. But you must have calculated the move h4. This was the basic point of white, right? They want to keep everything closed on the king side. This did not happen in the actual game, but that's the key line that you must have analyzed. How should black continue in this position, folks? Again, there's one directly winning move here for black, and you're a great player if you found the second pawn break, g5. Can you see how those double pawns are moving like a turtles? Very slowly. g5, g6 first, and now g4, g5 next. Comes those ideas. If you take my pawn, which you have to, otherwise I will take, and I'm opening up lines on the h-file, comes a very simple retreat. Knight d7, queen g5 is coming. Black didn't even sacrifice much, only a single pawn to be able to open up the h-file. The king is so lonely. That knight is excellent on e5, stopping f4 ideas as well because of en passant. Can you please look at black's coordination on the king side, guys? Queen g5 is coming, cannot be stopped, and this game is totally finished. Knight e4 seems to be stopping it, but in fact it doesn't, because after takes knight f3, that's a simple double threat, and black is winning this position easily. So after knight e7, in fact, white has no defense against these very simple takes, queen h5, battery, and entering in on the king side. The king is so lonely, he cannot even escape via e2. White has no time for that. This game is finished, guys, more or less. So after g4, white player take on g4 in the actual game, but then of course knight takes g4 happens, and white king is not feeling any safe. Knight e4 was the game continuation. The bishops are eyeing each other. Well, he took on e1 first. Black had several ways to win this position. Queen b4 was tried. Looking at all the white pieces, do not even hurry with the move rook h2 check. It can always be played on the next turn. White plays bishop c2, rook h2 is coming. This game is totally finished, guys. And here, final calculation. The queen needs to guard the rook on e1. Attacked once, guarded once. So black finds a move that finishes off this game directly. And you're a great player, folks, if you want the move knight f3. Simple tactic. The queen is overworked. This comes with a fork as well. And well, you have to take my knight, but then comes this, and it's just checkmate on the board. If you don't take my knight, then I can even take on e1, maybe even with my queen. I can exchange everything in a completely winning position with an extra exchange. And after rook h2 check, if king f1, then this skewer wins the rook and black wins the game. How did we even come to this position? I will show you. I will give you a couple of tips. We start from this one c4, then transpose to one of the main lines in the Slav defense, right? Knight f3, knight f6. Now we are back in the main line, two knights Slav, d takes c4 and a4. Bishop f5, we want to get the bishop out before playing e6. Very logical play for black as well. You want to use the b4 outpost to be able to fight against the move e4. I will show you all the moves, by the way, in the course, in the actual course. But for this episode, very importantly, we are focusing on those middle game ideas. Knight e5, I will be offering you this move knight e7 in the course. We are welcoming this transformation of the pawn structure. Already here, white has the bishop pair, but this bishop is sort of blunted. This bishop doesn't do anything on c1, and the knight pair and our long-term ideas and very secure and stable structure in the middle of the board is giving us a very good game, but even we can be more ambitious and play for a win if you especially execute the pawn break e5 very soon. After those moves, queen a5, multifunctional move, connecting our rooks while also preparing the break e5. Queen even controls that square. Can you see it, guys? We don't touch the pawn on c6, we don't play c5 pawn break because that pawn is killing that knight on c3 single-handedly, guys. Rook d8 first, comes e5, very soon, right? The queen actually guards that square, very important. The queen is very safe on a5 as well. Nobody can chase her away. And now black achieved everything that they want to achieve in this middle game. Completely fine position for black, no weaknesses whatsoever, but we can also be more ambitious. The queen starts eyeing the king side as well, highlighting those ideas. And now comes this key moment. After takes, we found the move g5, right? This transposed to the first position in this video. See how black connected those middle game ideas. See how black played very logical moves from this position, improving the final knight. Even that knight became an excellent piece on a5. No queen trade because our middle game ideas are stronger. Also, if you exchange the queens, guys, can you see it? Bishop pair is a strength in the middle game. White definitely will be preferable in this position, even after he takes d4, even by playing with the IQP. The IQP kills the knight, but they can also just play d5 very soon. And the bishop pair is a long-term strength, especially the unopposed bishop on b3 is a strength for white. So, no queen trade, of course, because you see how the game ended. The game ended almost with a checkmate. Our king is safe, and we play those positions. Finally, g6, king g7, rook h8 must be known by black. But once you know this pattern, once again, then you can apply it in your games. Even starting today, you can start applying those ideas. Your opponents will be shocked, more or less, once they see those pieces coming to the king side after a couple of strange looking pawn pushes. They will not even see it coming, and you will win beautiful games like that, beautiful attacking victories. Again, I'm challenging the sort of notion that Slav is a dull and boring opening. It can explode suddenly like this as well. And finally, remember, the only winning plan for black was g4, h4, g5. Double pawns are used explosively in opening up lines in terms of pawn breaks and pawn levers, and white cannot keep things closed on the king side, right? Once you come to this position, you understand they cannot keep it closed. Look at rook on d1. It occupies the open file, but there is no entry point. The rook cannot even join the defense. The bishop is blocking it. So these are also very important patterns that give the advantage to black in this middle game. After takes knight d7, as mentioned, nobody stopping the move queen takes g5, and slowly we are entering into white's. And once g4, h takes g4 was on the board, the game simply plays itself for black. Our king is so safe while the rook is coming to h2, guys. Once again, here a strong grandmaster finish off the game in a very clean way, right? Without even giving material. Just find those loose pieces, activating them, and finally this tactic popped up from a great position. One more game before we conclude today starts from the Slav again between two grandmasters. Okay, just normal stuff so far. D takes c4, a4, knight f6 transposes to mainline Slav with bishop f5. Right, very quickly I will show you the key moment. Bishop b4, all natural moves so far from both sides. Bishop g6. The idea behind the move is that e4 doesn't come with a tempo on the bishop, and if they now play e4, then the pawn is loose. Can you see it? So we first take that knight and then take on e4 with a good position for black. So bishop g6 cuts down on some theoretical lines. That's a basic point. And then here, of course, knight d7. We really challenge that knight immediately, and then we accept those double pawns. We accept this particular position. Queen f5, all the standard moves. This move also stops a5 by white at a key junction, right? Also controls e5, very multifunctional move, queen a5. That's why it's slightly better maybe than queen e7. That's also a very logical move, of course, by black, very typical. Okay, queen a5, knight e2. It's a different line. They instantly challenge that strong bishop on b4, and we don't want to take on a4. You can take it, but it becomes a mess, right? We don't want to grab some random pawns like that in this repertoire. So the bishop drops back to d6. Beautiful location, while also preparing and supporting the pawn break e5, right? This is a much more traditional treatment. Even here, we don't take on b4, because if you take on b4 twice, then you get this little skewer of bishop a3, right? We don't touch the pawn after b4. He dropped back to c7. Now he forms this little battery while also preparing, of course, the break e5. Black play is so logical, easy to understand. Remember, piece placements are easy and intuitive. And once e5 is on the board, right, we are challenging that center. We will follow that with moves like rook d8 perhaps. But also don't ever forget our long-term plan on the king side with g5, g4. Okay? Very quickly, I will show you the game. Knight b6 hits the bishop. Also prepares knight d5 at a key moment. Now comes e4. The pawn on e4. Very typical, very standard, right? It can support our attack on the king side. And what kind of an attack are you talking about on the king side? Well, you tell me. You already know the pattern. Our pattern is g5, g6, king g7, rook h8. Looks very slow, but we can improve step by step on the king side, and white cannot crush us on the queen side. White has no instant counterplay to divert us from our king side initiative. Look at the white pieces. All of them are on the queen side. Their king is lonely. And I'll show you a beautiful segment again. There are different ways to play for black. Queen d7 is nice, avoiding the alignment and also eyeing some key light squares that could be useful at a later stage, right? In supporting our attack on the king side. b5 is on the board. White must do something on the queen side directly. But he ignores the pawn because even after they take on c6, this pawn is not an instant target. It's well guarded, but also rook b8s are coming for activity on the b file. So that's also not easy for white to take on c6 yet. And their knight is in Siberia, so they need to spend one full tempo with knight c3 as well, guys. Okay? And after knight c3 comes my question. Can you please find that beautiful middle game plan for black? This plan is so beautiful, so logical. You know it already, guys. He plays g5. Very practical, very dangerous impractical play to handle as well. Suddenly, couple of ideas. g4 to have a full clamp on the king side, but also more maybe to support g6, king g7, and rook h8, and our rook has joined the attack on the king side. Beautiful play. Beautiful play. See how these two pawns are also speaking to one another. We mentioned e4 pawn is giving us space on the king side. It actually supports our king side initiative, and now the other pawn is reaching g5 and the game plays itself. The game plays itself. Already objectively a better position for black. Practically, I think it's clearly better for black. It's difficult to defend as humans. Rook b8. You see how he takes his time? He's making this flexible move before deciding. Because the idea is this. If you take my pawn, then my rook is becoming a happy creature on the b file. Can you see how flexible he's playing this position? There is no hurry. Rook b8 improves before he's going for the final action, because white cannot stop this plan of g6, king g7, rook h8. It's coming, guys. Okay, g4 is on the board. Even g6 was okay with the same idea. Will be a very good move for black, but he also pushes g4. Very interesting as well. Full clamp on f3, stopping all kind of f3 moves by white, because maybe only way for white to disturb our pawn on e4 was to play the break f3, to maybe put some pieces on the f file. g4 also stops f3 altogether. Now those pawns are completely frozen, and black is all the time in the world to get this rook on the h file to start hitting that weakness on h2. Beautiful move. bc, the rook got active, and this pawn has been weakened, but it's very difficult for white to attack and grab that pawn on c6. Knight takes d5, c takes d5. Now there is no more weakness on c6. Bishop b5. Well, the queen simply goes to f5, guys. Can you see it? The queen joins the zone. The queen joins the battle on the king side. And now, well, if you come back to your senses, all the play belongs to black. on the king side. And we are coming to the final action. How do you improve on the king side, guys? Yes, we mentioned the queen and maybe the knight and maybe the bishop are looking at the king side, but right now the rook does nothing on f8. How do you get this rook involved in the attack on the king side, guys? This doesn't work because of the bishop. This only allows a trade. We don't want that. We want to attack the white king by bringing more pieces to the king side, and you're a great player if you found the plan g6. Even g5 was okay with the same exact idea, but g5 would block the queen's access to h5. Thus, g6 is much more natural and stronger. The idea is king g7, rook h8, and our rook is becoming happy. Rook c6, they want to try something directly. The problem is the bishop can simply move to b4 with an attack on the rook. Our bishop is quite safe. And after this, you tell me the plan, the winning plan. Of course, king g7. And now this is coming, guys. Right? This is coming. White is sort of busted. Even the bishop on b2 is a terrible piece, blunted by the pawn on d4. Can you see it? So that's why they offer a bishop trade. We don't mind the trade because the bishop doesn't do much on this diagonal. We cannot even return back to d6 because of this. So black doesn't lose time and black focuses on the king side action. Here it is. After spending 4 full tempo, the rook joins the h file, and now suddenly queen h5 is coming and white is helpless against the threat on h2. Can you see it, guys? White cannot bring reinforcements on the weak pawn on h2, on the loose pawn on h2. Our attack is raging on the king side in a beautiful fashion. Black is already winning, by the way. You can come back to your senses. You can try to evaluate this position objectively. It's like -4 to black, despite material equality. That's what attacks do in chess, right? Simply we attack the king and they have no response whatsoever. Rook c7. They have to play dynamically. They have to create play on the weakness on f7, but our attack is starting much faster on the king side. I will ask you a question. There are 2 winning moves here for black. One of them involves more tactical, direct calculations, maybe sacrifice. The other one is a logical attack without sacrificing. Please tell me both of these candidate moves and maybe analyze the one that involves a sacrifice. You're a great player, folks. If you found the sacrificial line, rook takes h2, very typical in terms of attacking play against the lonely king. If they take on h2, the point is after queen f2, the king can no longer return back to the g file. It must remain on the h file, but then the final guy joins the attack with a checkmate. Isn't it cute? That's a beautiful rook sacrifice, very standard. The idea is, of course, is to checkmate them on the h file by first of all cutting off all of their escape squares with the queen. Rook h2, maybe white could have sacrificed on f7, but here after king takes f7, rook c7 check. You can even do this, guys. You can even escape to g8. Yes, you can no longer checkmate them like this, but then this final piece joins the attack. There is no rook h8, but please tell me where should this knight go from h6? And you're a great player if you found knight h5, and white is helpless against a very simple threat. Knight takes g3, checkmate, queen and knight combo. The king is so lonely. There are no checks to calculate in this position for black. White must resign in this position, okay? They have to sacrifice the queen, of course, but this game is totally finished with so much extra material for black. So, rook h2 was also winning for black, but in the actual game, human player played a very logical move, queen h5. I mean, right, what can be more natural? And they are slowly cashing in on the king side. Well, only calculation you must do before playing queen h5 is, what if white plays the move h4? What if white uses this en passant to be able to exchange the queens? If you take en passant, then the queens will be traded off. Here comes my question, guys. What should black play in this position? Do you take en passant or do you play something else? This also connects to this episode beautifully. You're a great player, folks. If you found the pawn break g5, vicious double pawns. One of them goes to g4, the other one goes to g5. The whole idea is to open up lines, right? Can you see how those double pawns are used like pawn levers to open up lines against the white king? Well, we have all the time in the role as well. Our king is quite safe. You cannot take because of checkmate, but if you cannot take, I will take on h4 and I will be opening up lines slowly but surely against your king. You are totally busted. There is no defense for white whatsoever. I can even take here. The king still has no escape whatsoever. I can even take on g3, enter in with queen h2 checks. The king has no shelter whatsoever, guys. This game is totally lost. I can even take the check. just disaster. And after g5, well, the only sacrifice is this, but I can even take back with my queen or with my king, and there is no attack whatsoever. So you had no counterplay. That's my point after g5. Our king is quite safe. After queen h5, he did not play h4 for some reason. He instantly took on a7. He doesn't want to play h4 and test black from finding g5. But of course, this gave black a direct opportunity to start their attack first on the king side. Check, check, check. Queen f3 check as well. One more pawn is dropping on f2. Comes a check. In this position, directly rook h2 was winning. Maybe that's actually the most logical move, right? That's a big point, of course. Rook b2 check is coming. They cannot even move a single piece, guys. White is completely busted. If they go for a counterplay, it's simply too slow. Comes one more check. Well, if this happens, I can even take on e2 because my king is quite safe on h6. Can you see it? I can even allow you to take f7 with check because there is no check to follow. The king is so super safe, and now the game is completely finished with those ideas. So after bishop e2, rook h2 was winning, rook b2 check was also winning. He played the other move, queen takes g3, looks a little bit too slow, but in fact even this is winning because after rook c7, he ignored the pawn. He simply plays rook h3, and now white cannot even defend the e3 square. He allows check, but then king h6. Look how safe the king is. There is no check because of the knight. If you take the knight, then your rooks are split. There is no worry about my king. Comes this check, and then the game is over, guys. After rook b2, they simply resigned in this position because after this comes queen c3 check. The game is totally finished. Otherwise, where are you going? The king has no moves. You must sacrifice the queen. But of course, this game is totally finished. After takes. I can even do this finally, right? Pick up your bishop. The game is finished. Black wins. Isn't it cute? We've seen two beautiful games that involved the same exact motif, middle game motif of g5, g6, king g7, rook h8, and attack against the opponent's king. That's the way to study your openings. You must connect it to recurrent, important, and practical middle game ideas, right? When you look at a position like this, you must see at some point of which area you're playing for, on which side of the board you're stronger, which pawn break you're playing for, right? Even we can even start from this. We are playing for the break e5 by black in this position, right? To, let's say, neutralize white's central control, to activate our pieces. But also one more point of e5 is at some point we can push e4 and turn this into an attack on the king side, right? Because of the pawn on e4, usually very strong force when it comes to the attacking context on the king side. Can you see how even pushing the pawn to e4 allowed black all this extra space on the king side, and white pieces could not really easily return and defend their king on the king side. That's how you diversify in the middle game structures from your openings. And in the course that I'm working on, I'll be giving you those recurrent and important positional chunks and ideas. And when I see beautiful games like this that show the same exact team from different contexts, I always want to make a video about this to inform you on those beautiful plans which you can apply in your games very soon to beat players without them even noticing what's coming at them on the king side, right? Because at first glance looks like, okay, I mean, the bishop is blunted, the knight has no forward moves, the queen looks okay, but there are no entry points whatsoever. How are the rooks even joining the attack? You might ask yourself, right? And once you actually eliminate all the other possibilities, you must come up to the conclusion that this must be the only way for black to make the rook involved in the attack. And because of double pawns, because the h-file has already been semi-open, right? We have all these ideas, while white is lacking a similar plan on the king side, but also on the queen side, right? So please keep in mind this winning idea, g6, in those Slav structures. You can even apply it to different openings that show the same exact pattern, right? Like this same exact pawn structure transformation occurs in so many different openings too. So you can even use this pattern, let's say, to apply it even sometimes to the white pieces when you have a similar structure in your games. That's why this is a very useful video that has high chance of occurrence in your games, folks. By the way, please be mindful. The same pattern cannot be applied to all contexts that show this exact pawn structure. Remember, we talked about this pawn structure as potentially giving us a chance to play those moves, but here it's not justified. First of all, you cannot even play g5 because white already controls that square, but also, can you see it? White already gained so much space on the king side by pushing e5, by restricting our army to start with. And it's you who needs to be careful against white's ideas like that on the king side. It ultimately is also about how fast they can organize their pieces on the king side, who has more space to maneuver their pieces from A to B. In this case, it's white, obviously, given their space advantage, right? You also notice the effect of the central pawn on E5 on giving them chances on the king side. Compare and contrast this position with the position we just saw, which involved our pawn on E4, which was restraining their pieces on the king side. In the previous game, black had a pawn on E4, we justified all the initiative on a later stage on the king side. Here, it's the other way around, right? So you cannot just blindly say, oh, I have those double pawns, let me go for a king side push with G5, G6, King G7 and Rook H8, right? It's also about timing. Do you have even time for all this? But do you even have justifications for an attack on the king side? Here, even the bishop cannot do this. That could eye some squares. Our knight cannot use the E5 square, and so on and so on, right? So that's my bottom line, that everything has to be applied in the right context. So much so is that some black players, scared of white's attack on the king side like that, they prefer to take back with the f pawn in this position. This looks very ugly because you give yourself this terribly weak pawn on e6. You're sort of breaking your pawn structure, but the claim is our king is much safer right now because we can even push h6. If white plays all these moves later on, we can even play h6 to guard our king. In our repertoire, we'll avoid all this by very smartly moving to bishop g6, stopping e4, e5 ideas from white, right? That's the bottom line. That's how you also should study your openings, by comparing to some of the other main lines. By playing bishop g6 directly, we are stopping white from gaining space with e4 tempo followed without e5, which could transpose to the position I just showed you. Indeed, this is one of the main functions of this move, because even here, right, e4 has problems because of knight b6, right? We are using some short-term tactics to stop white from playing e4, e5 and gaining space on the king side, right? Can you see the basic point of our ideas? And by stopping e4 this way, you also have long-term advantages in terms of preparing e5 unhindered. Even here, e4 will be answered by e5, and we will never give white a chance to play e5 and to gain all the space on the king side, right? We're just in time to play this e5 pawn break to stop the pawn on its rails. And now even rook d8 and rook e8 are coming. Black has a very good game, maybe even a slight advantage in this position. In the actual course, I will be showing you all these typical maneuvers. For example, how do you react to the move d5, which is very standard. Should we take? Should we wait for them to take, right? I will be giving you all these positional tools that is high chance of occurrence, while always break it down to its core and the why elements by giving you beautiful model games as well that you can study. Let's finish with this homework position, folks. Black to play another Slav position. How would you evaluate this position, and how would you play with the black pieces here? What would be your game plan, middle game plan with the black pieces from this position? Please apply the lesson I showed you today. Compare and contrast to what you've seen in this video. Is the better version for black or for white? And how would you be your, let's say, next 4 to 5 moves with black in this position? How would you organize your pieces with black in this position? Okay? I hope you loved the video. If you loved it, please like and subscribe and share the channel with a friend of yours who you would think would benefit from its content. That's very important for me, guys. I noticed that only 50% of you regular viewers subscribe to this channel so far. Please, it's free. Just hit that subscribe button. That will really help me to produce similar content for you for free on YouTube into the future. Thank you so much and see you soon. Bye-bye.